In February of 2025, a meeting took place in the Oval Office that, honestly, sent shockwaves through the diplomatic world. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived at the White House, hoping to secure continued support for his country's grueling war effort. But instead of the warm reception he might have expected from a key ally, he was met with a harsh and, well, unexpected rebuke. President Donald Trump, together with Vice President J.D. Vance, used the occasion not for reassurance but for a public scolding. They openly accused the Ukrainian leader of being ungrateful for the vast amounts of military assistance the United States had provided. This verbal lashing wasn't a private affair, it happened right in front of the cameras. The final 10 minutes of that February meeting were particularly brutal, etching a lasting image of diplomatic discord. According to multiple reports, President Trump and Vice President Vance repeatedly interrupted and criticized President Zelensky. When President Zelensky tried to respond to the pointed criticisms, he was swiftly cut off. "No, you've done a lot of talking," President Trump reportedly said, a moment that really underscored the power imbalance in the room. Media outlets around the globe described it as an unprecedented public confrontation, a stark departure from the norms of international diplomacy. He left the White House not with renewed promises of aid, but with a public reputation that had been, frankly, bruised. In the months following the disastrous February meeting, a quiet but determined effort began to unfold across Europe. Leaders on the continent, deeply concerned by the public rift between Washington and Kiev, recognized the urgent need to prevent a repeat of the incident. A plan began to form, not in public declarations but through high-level diplomatic calls and private discussions among European capitals. This culminated in a remarkable and highly unusual diplomatic maneuver. As Zelensky prepared for his second visit to Washington in August, one European leader after another announced they would be joining him. The leaders of key European nations decided to physically stand by Zelensky's side during his return to the White House. When the day of the second meeting arrived on August 18, 2025, the scene at the White House was dramatically different from the one 6 months prior. Instead of a lone Ukrainian president arriving for a tense one-on-one, a delegation of Europe's most influential leaders flanked Volodymyr Zelensky. This powerful visual of unity was broadcast around the world, immediately setting a new and more respectful tone. The discussions were no longer just a bilateral conversation between the United States and Ukraine, but a multilateral summit on European security. Each leader present had the opportunity to speak, reinforcing the message that the war in Ukraine was a matter of continental and indeed global concern. By physically being in the room, they ensured that their perspectives on security, sanctions, and the path to a just peace were communicated directly to the American president. President Zelensky himself undertook a significant and carefully planned image makeover for his second White House visit. The first and most visible change was his attire. He shed his signature army green fatigues in favor of a formal black business suit. From the moment he began to speak, President Zelensky focused on expressing profound appreciation. He started his public remarks by thanking President Trump multiple times, not just for American support in general, but for the president's personal efforts in seeking an end to the conflict. On the American side, Vice President J.D. Vance and other administration officials who had been vocal critics in the February meeting were conspicuously silent. The combination of Zelensky's new deferential approach and the muzzling of internal hardliners created the perfect conditions for a diplomatic reset. The contrast between the February and August meetings could not have been more stark. Where the first was filled with tension and open hostility, the second was a remarkably cordial affair. The shared smiles and handshakes captured by the press were not just for show, they reflected a genuine and successful diplomatic reset. This new, friendlier atmosphere allowed for a much more productive conversation. With the issue of gratitude now off the table, the leaders were able to focus on the substantive issues at hand. Observers noted that the meeting felt less like a confrontation and more like a collaborative problem-solving session, which was precisely the outcome Ukraine and its European partners had hoped for. For President Zelensky, the cordiality of the meeting was a significant personal and political victory. He had successfully navigated a treacherous diplomatic landscape and redeemed his standing. The successful outcome demonstrated a crucial lesson in modern diplomacy: adaptability is key. This flexibility completely altered the dynamic of the relationship with the Trump White House. The most significant outcome of the successful August meeting was President Trump's announcement of a bold new peace initiative. Trump revealed he was actively working to arrange a direct meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin. He announced a three-step process. First, a bilateral summit between Putin and Zelensky, followed by a trilateral meeting where Trump himself would join the two leaders. President Trump shared that he had already discussed the plan with President Putin in a phone call that took place while the negotiations with Zelensky were underway. Alongside the plan for peace talks was the second major breakthrough, promise of long-term security guarantees for Ukraine to be formalized on paper within the next week to 10 days. Expected to include a massive purchase of American weapons, this shifted U.S. support from emergency aid to a structured long-term defense partnership backed by formal agreements with leading military powers. In the end, President Zelensky's second visit to the Trump White House marked a stunning turnaround and a profound personal redemption. He transformed a relationship that began with public humiliation into a constructive partnership that yielded historic results. By carefully adjusting his strategy, appearance, and rhetoric, he demonstrated a remarkable capacity for pragmatic diplomacy. The unprecedented decision by European leaders to accompany him to Washington was a masterstroke of strategy, providing a crucial shield and changing the entire dynamic. The concrete outcomes, a plan for direct talks between Kyiv and Moscow, and promise of formal, long-term security guarantees, represented a monumental victory for Ukraine. These breakthroughs offered a tangible path toward ending the current war and securing the nation's future. Ultimately, Volodymyr Zelensky won back the White House by understanding the art of diplomacy in a new political age. His journey from being berated in the Oval Office to standing as a respected partner in a major peace initiative serves as a powerful case study in modern statecraft and a defining moment of his leadership.